March 8th, 2014, 1:19 a.m. The South China Sea is pitch black. Inside the cockpit of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370, everything seems normal. Captain Zahari Ahmed Shah keys his mic and utters 5 simple words. "Good night, Malaysian 370. It's a routine sign-off. But those were the last words anyone would ever hear from that cockpit. Moments later, 239 people simply ceased to exist. No mayday call, no debris, no oil slick. A massive Boeing 777, one of the safest machines ever built, vanished from every radar screen on Earth, as if it had flown into another dimension. Today, we are going deep, deeper than any documentary you've seen. We are tracing the final path of the ghost plane that defied physics and broke the world's trust in aviation. What really happened in that cockpit? And why does it feel like someone didn't want this plane to be found?
It started as a standard red-eye flight from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing. The weather was perfect. The aircraft, a Boeing 777-200ER, was a masterpiece of engineering. These planes are designed to be impossible to lose. They have transponders, ACAR systems, GPS, and multiple radios. They are constantly talking to satellites and ground stations. On board were 227 passengers and 12 crew members. Families, businessmen, artists, and 2 young men traveling on stolen passports, a detail that would later send the world into a frenzy of terror theories. At 12:41 a.m., the engines roared to life. MH370 lifted off, climbing smoothly to 35,000 feet. For the first 40 minutes, it was a textbook flight. The passengers were settling in, blankets were being handed out, and the cabin lights were dimmed. On the radar screens of Subang Air Traffic Control, MH370 was just a steady green blip moving northeast toward Vietnam. But as the plane approached the border between Malaysian and Vietnamese airspace, something chilling began to happen. In aviation, this transition is called the handoff. It's a moment of vulnerability where one controller says goodbye and the next says hello. At 1:19 a.m., the Malaysian controller said, "Malaysia 370, contact Ho Chi Minh 120.9. Good night." Captain Zahari replied, "Good night, Malaysian 370. This was the last transmission. 2 minutes later, at 1:21 a.m., the plane's transponder, the device that tells radar who and where the plane is, was manually switched off. Just like that, MH370 became a ghost.
Imagine you are the air traffic controller in Vietnam. You are waiting for MH370 to check in. You look at your screen. 1 minute passes. 5 minutes. 10. The green blip that was MH370 is gone. You call the cockpit. Silence. You call again. Only static. Back in Malaysia, the controllers are also confused. They look at their primary radars. Primary radar is different. It doesn't rely on the plane's transponder. It's a ping that bounces off the metal skin of the aircraft. They see something. A dark target making a sharp, aggressive turn to the left. This wasn't a slow drift. This was a deliberate tactical maneuver. Whoever was flying MH370 turned the plane nearly 180 degrees back toward Malaysia. But they weren't going back to the airport. They were flying along the border between two countries' radar zones. Why? Because if you fly on the line between two zones, each controller thinks you are the other person's problem. It's a classic move used by fighter pilots to avoid detection. The plane crossed back over the Malay Peninsula. It was flying fast, faster than it should have been. It bypassed the city of Penang, the hometown of Captain Zahari. Military radar tracked it as it headed out toward the Andaman Sea, moving away from civilization and into the vast, empty darkness of the Indian Ocean. At this point, the world had no idea what was happening. To the families waiting in Beijing, the flight was just delayed on the arrivals board. But in the corridors of power, the Malaysian government was realizing a terrifying truth. They had lost a 250-ton jet, and they had no idea who was currently at the controls. Was it a hijack? Was it a mechanical failure so catastrophic that it knocked out all electronics? Or was it something far more sinister? A plan hatched by someone inside the cockpit who knew exactly how to hide a giant from the world. The mystery was only getting started, because while the radios were dead, the plane's heart was still beating. A secret, silent signal was still being sent to a satellite high above the Earth, and what that signal revealed would change the search forever.
While the world's media was focused on the South China Sea, where the plane first vanished from secondary radar, a group of engineers at a company called Inmarsat, thousands of miles away in London, were looking at something incredible. They realized that MH370 had a specialized satellite communication terminal on board. Even though the pilots had turned off the transponder and the ACAR system, the satellite terminal was still powered on. It was like a cell phone that's on silent mode. It's not making calls, but it's still handshaking with the nearest cell tower to say, "I am here." Every hour for 7 hours, the satellite sent a ping to MH370, and every hour, the plane's terminal answered. This meant that while the world was searching for debris near Vietnam, the plane was still flying. It flew for 1 hour, then 2, then 5. By the time the sun began to rise over the Indian Ocean, MH370 was still in the air. 239 people were flying on a ghost ship thousands of miles away from their destination. But where were they going? The Inmarsat engineers used a complex mathematical technique called the Doppler effect, measuring the tiny shifts in the frequency of those pings to calculate the plane's distance from the satellite. They drew 2 massive arcs on the map, one pointing north towards Kazakhstan and one pointing south towards the freezing, empty waters of the southern Indian Ocean. The north route was impossible. To fly that way, MH370 would have had to cross the airspaces of India, Pakistan, and China, some of the most heavily darted skies in the world. Military radars would have scrambled fighter jets in minutes, but no one saw a thing. That left only one terrifying conclusion: the South Arc. MH370 had turned away from the world and flown straight into the abyss, one of the most remote places on the planet, where the ocean is 5 miles deep and the currents are deadly.
The man in the cockpit, hero or villain. As the investigation shifted to the southern Indian Ocean, all eyes turned to the man in the captain's seat, Zahari Ahmad Shah. Zahari wasn't a rookie. He was a veteran, a flight simulator in his own home. He had a YouTube channel where he showed people how to fix air conditioners and fly planes. He was well-liked,
respected, and seemingly happy. But when the police raided his house, they found something that chilled them to the bone. On his home flight simulator, Zahari had recently practiced a very specific route. It wasn't a route to Beijing or London. It was a path that led deep into the southern Indian Ocean, ending exactly where the satellite ping suggested MH370 had disappeared. He had deleted the files, but FBI experts managed to recover them. Was this a practice run for a mass murder-suicide? Think about the precision of the turn at 1:21 a.m. Whoever was flying knew exactly when to turn off the electronics. They knew exactly where the blind spots in the radar were. They knew how to depressurize the cabin. This leads us to one of the darkest theories in aviation history. If you depressurize a Boeing 777 at 35,000 feet, the oxygen masks drop for the passengers, but those masks only last for 15 to 22 minutes. After that, everyone in the cabin, the families, the children, the crew, would fall into a deep sleep called hypoxia. They wouldn't even know they were dying. They would just drift away. But the pilot, he has access to a separate oxygen supply in the cockpit that lasts for hours. If this theory is true, Zahari Ahmad Shah spent the final 7 hours of his life flying a plane full of 238 corpses, staring out into the pitch-black horizon of the Indian Ocean, waiting for the fuel to run out. But why? No note was left, no political manifesto, just a silent flight into oblivion.
But wait, before we blame the pilot, there's another detail that doesn't fit. The cargo manifest of MH370. The plane was carrying 221 kilograms of lithium-ion batteries. These batteries are known to be volatile. If they catch fire, they create a thermal runaway that is almost impossible to extinguish. Some experts argue that a massive electrical fire started in the cargo hold, knocking out the communications and filling the cockpit with toxic smoke. In this scenario, the pilot's sharp turn wasn't a tactical maneuver. It was a desperate attempt to fly back to the nearest airport to save the plane. But before he could land, the smoke overwhelmed him. The crew and passengers died from the fumes, and the plane, controlled by the autopilot, simply kept flying on its last heading until it ran out of gas. But if it was a fire, why didn't it burn the plane's structure? Why didn't the plane crash immediately? And why did the turn happen exactly at the handoff between air traffic controllers? The timing is too perfect for an accident. Then there's the 2 passports. 2 Iranian men, Puria Nur Muhammad Mehrdad and Delavar Sayed Muhammad Reza, were on board using stolen Austrian and Italian passports. For a few days, the world was convinced this was a terrorist hijacking. But the investigation revealed they were just 2 young men looking for a better life in Europe, illegal immigrants, not terrorists. Or were they the perfect cover for someone else? As the months passed, the search area grew to 120,000 square kilometers. The most expensive search in history found nothing. No seats, no suitcases, no wings. The ocean was empty. Until a piece of metal washed up on a beach 2,500 miles away. And what it told us was even more confusing.
The first piece of the puzzle. For 508 days, the world had nothing. No bodies, no luggage, not even a single floating seat cushion. MH370 was a digital ghost. But on July 29, 2015, the ghost finally left a footprint. Our remote beach on Reunion Island, thousands of miles away from the search zone, a man cleaning the shore found a strange barnacle-encrusted piece of metal. It was about 2 meters long, shaped like a wing. This was the flaperon, a part of the Boeing 777's wing. Investigators confirmed it. It belonged to MH370. This discovery didn't bring peace. It brought more terrifying questions. When engineers examined the flaperon, they noticed something strange about the way it had broken off. Usually, when a plane hits the water at high speed, like a crash, the parts are shattered into thousands of tiny fragments. But this piece was relatively intact. Some aviation experts, including veteran investigator Larry Vance, argued that the flaperon was extended when it hit the water. In a Boeing 777, you only extend the flaps when you are trying to land. This suggests that someone was at the controls until the very last second. Someone wasn't just letting the plane fall, they were trying to perform a controlled ditching, landing the plane on the ocean surface to sink it in one piece. If the plane sank intact, it would explain why no debris was found for over a year. It would mean the 239 people on board didn't die in an explosion. They were still alive when the plane hit the water, and then they slowly sank into the 5-mile deep darkness of the Indian Ocean. But why would someone sink a plane so carefully? This brings us to the mysterious cargo. We know about the batteries, but there was something else on that plane. 2.5 tons of electronic equipment that was never X-rayed. The manifest listed it as walkie-talkies and chargers, but why was it not scanned before being loaded onto one of the world's most high-profile flights? Some conspiracy theorists, and even some former intelligence officers, believe MH370 was carrying highly sensitive technology. Perhaps it was U.S. drone technology captured by a foreign power, or a top-secret piece of surveillance equipment being smuggled to Beijing. There is a wild theory that the U.S. military, operating from their secret base at Diego Garcia in the middle of the Indian Ocean, intercepted the plane. Diego Garcia is a massive, highly restricted military island. If a hijacked Boeing 777 was flying toward a U.S. base, would they shoot it down to prevent another 9/11? Or did they use electronic warfare to hack the plane's flight computer and fly it to the island remotely? The U.S. government has officially denied these claims, but the timing of the flight's disappearance from radar and its final pings near the Maldives, close to Diego Garcia, is a coincidence that many find impossible to ignore. Locals in the Maldives even reported seeing a low-flying jumbo jet with Malaysian colors on the morning the plane vanished, but the official investigation dismissed their stories. Why?
The mysterious 9th passenger. While the world looked at the pilots, a few independent investigators began looking at the passenger list again. Not just the 2 Iranians with stolen passports, but everyone. They found something disturbing. On the plane were 20 employees of a Texas-based company called Freescale Semiconductor. These weren't just office workers. They were high-level engineers working on cloaking technology, stealth systems designed to make aircraft invisible to radar. Is it possible that the plane was cloaked by its own passengers? Or was the plane hijacked specifically to kidnap these 20 experts? This leads to the Russian theory. Jeff Wise, a prominent aviation journalist, proposed a shocking idea:
that Russian operatives on board entered the electronics bay, a hatch located just outside the cockpit, and took control of the plane's internal computers. He argues that the satellite data was spoofed, faked, to lead the searchers to the south, while the plane actually flew north to a secret airfield in Kazakhstan. It sounds like a movie plot, but in the world of MH370, every normal explanation has failed. The official search, which cost over $200 million and covered an area larger than the state of Florida, found absolutely nothing on the seafloor. No engines, no black boxes, no fuselage. If the plane is where the satellites say it is, why can't we find it? Or is it possible that we are looking for a plane that was never meant to be found?
At 0:11 a.m., while the sun was beginning to touch the surface of the Indian Ocean, a satellite thousands of miles above Earth attempted one last handshake with MH370. This was the seventh arc. Engineers at Inmarsat realized this final signal was different. It was incomplete. It wasn't a scheduled check-in. It was a power failure. The Boeing 777's right engine had likely run dry, followed minutes later by the left. The autopilot disengaged. The glass cockpit went dark. Mathematical models suggest a terrifying end. The plane entered a high-speed death spiral dive, plummeting toward the water at over 15,000 feet per minute. But there is a second, more chilling possibility. If a pilot was still conscious, they could have glided the aircraft for another 100 miles in total silence, dropping it gently into the deep to ensure it sank in one piece, hidden forever. The search for the black box. The official search for MH370 was the most expensive and complex in human history. Led by the Australian Transport Safety Bureau, ATSB, it covered 120,000 square kilometers of the seafloor, an area larger than the state of Pennsylvania. High-tech sonar scanned the jagged mountains of the Broken Ridge, a landscape as alien as the surface of Mars. They found 19th-century shipwrecks at an ancient underwater volcanoes, but they never found a single bolt of the Boeing 777. In the U.S., private tech companies like Ocean Infinity have stepped in, using swarms of autonomous underwater drones. They operate on a no-cure, no-fee basis, meaning if they don't find the plane, they don't get paid. So far, the ocean has kept its secrets. The black boxes, designed to ping for only 30 days, have been silent for over a decade.
The human toll. 239 empty chairs. Beyond the radar data and the cloaking theories lies the heart of the tragedy. 239 lives. In the United States, families of the 3 American passengers, including Philip Wood, an IBM executive, still wait for a truth that never arrives. For these families, MH370 isn't a cold case or a digital ghost. It is a daughter's wedding without a father. It is a child growing up with a parent who simply vanished. The lack of transparency from the Malaysian government fueled a decade of pain. Why was the military radar ignored? Why was the captain's flight simulator data, which showed a route into the southern Indian Ocean, downplayed for years? To the families, it feels less like a mystery and more like a cover-up. The new lead, WSPR technology. As we move further into the 2020s, a new hope has emerged from an unlikely source, WSPR, Weak Signal Propagation Reporter.
British aerospace engineer Richard Godfrey believes he has found
The human toll. 239 empty chairs. Beyond the radar data and the cloaking theories lies the heart of the tragedy. 239 lives. In the United States, families of the 3 American passengers, including Philip Wood, an IBM executive, still wait for a truth that never arrives. For these families, MH370 isn't a cold case or a digital ghost. It is a daughter's wedding without a father. It is a child growing up with a parent who simply vanished. The lack of transparency from the Malaysian government fueled a decade of pain. Why was the military radar ignored? Why was the captain's flight simulator data, which showed a route into the southern Indian Ocean, downplayed for years? To the families, it feels less like a mystery and more like a cover-up. The new lead, WSPR technology. As we move further into the 2020s, a new hope has emerged from an unlikely source, WSPR, Weak Signal Propagation Reporter. British aerospace engineer Richard Godfrey believes he has found the plane's tripwires. He uses a global network of amateur radio signals that crisscross the globe. When a plane passes through these signals, it leaves a disturbance. By tracing these digital footprints, Godfrey argues the plane is located at a specific point 1,200 miles west of Perth, Australia. Hidden in a trench 13,000 feet deep. The conclusion. A modern legend.
The story of MH370 is the greatest mystery of the 21st century. It challenges our belief that we are always being watched, always being tracked. It proves that even today, the world is still vast, and the ocean is still a place of terrifying, absolute darkness. Is the plane sitting intact on the ocean floor? A steel tomb for 239 people? Or is it in a hangar in a remote desert, part of a geopolitical game we don't yet understand? Until we find the fuselage, MH370 remains a digital ghost. It is a reminder that technology is only as reliable as the humans who operate it. As the years pass, the barnacles will continue to grow on the debris, and the currents will continue to shift. The flight was supposed to land in Beijing on a quiet Saturday morning. Instead, it flew into the history books. Leaving us with a haunting silence and a question that echoes across the water. MH370 is the greatest mystery of the 21st century.